My mother worked in the textile industry for 40 years. And I'm not sure what year this was. There was a movie theater right next to the drugstore, and that's what the Carolina is. There were businesses all along this end of the street and down this end of the street also. There were approximately 6 major textile manufacturing plants. They started closing in the early 90s. The last of them closed, I believe, in the late 90s.
And we had thousands of people in those mills and had just a vibrant community full of life, busy streets, Main Street just bustling. The communities, the neighborhoods around the mills were all full. The houses were well taken care of, and it was just a really great community to live in.
Well, of course, the population has dwindled some. A lot of those people that worked in the mills have moved away.
These houses were originally built, most in this neighborhood were built originally for mill workers.
But I mean, overall the house is square.
Yeah.
All the corners are square, all the ceilings are square.
We assess the properties like this one. If it's something that can be saved, it goes to Rutherford Housing Partnership. If not, we demolition and rebuild on the lot.
Come on, you telling me you don't want these doors in your home?
I actually love those doors. We have 15 lots now that we're getting ready to construct on.
Our organization's focus was on doing critical home repairs and urgent home repairs for extremely low-income families. Most of our families are making below $10,000 a year. But we have a really big open front room.
This homeowner needs a new roof. Today, we're trying to get the back half of the roof done. To me, success in 2 years is to get rid of those pockets that are so unsightly, so that it makes everybody prouder of their community.
I think working with these partners in Spindale will achieve something that everyone's going to be proud of.
The best part about roofing is that at the end of the day, there's a finished product. And that finished product is that somebody else's life is made better.
Good afternoon. It's so wonderful to hear and see all the energy in this room. I'm Susan Mims, the CEO of Dogwood Health Trust, and I am delighted to welcome you all to our 2022 annual community meeting. The video you just saw demonstrates just how courageous and compassionate and collaborative you all are. This clip happens to be from Spindale in Rutherford County, but the energy and promise you saw could be anywhere in our region. Over the past year, our Dogwood team has been honored to work with you and to learn from your deep knowledge of the communities you serve. Our vision is to enhance the innovative and dedicated work to create a Western North Carolina where every generation can live, learn, earn, and thrive. I'm so glad that you could join us today, whether you're online or here in the room at Blue Ridge Community College. And we are thrilled to have you. And we were here today, we want to share an overview with you of the work that we've done beside you, with you, throughout this year, and to tell you a little bit more about where we're headed in 2023. Our partners across the region, including many of you here in the room, are doing amazing work. You're finding ways to create and preserve affordable housing, including for those who may need permanent support, such as people with differing abilities, people who have survived interpersonal violence, and our senior population. You're honoring the dignity and the desires of individuals and families who wish to stay in their homes, but provided needing repairs, protecting the health of residents, and preserving affordable housing. You are deploying a diverse and trusted team of community health workers who share accurate information and make connections to health resources so that people can get compassionate and culturally competent and knowledgeable care. You're helping hundreds of individuals, from children to parents to even grandparents, struggling with substance use, to find treatment without stigma, housing that supports their transition away from dependence, and employment without boundaries. You are connecting small businesses with the workers and the capital that they need to grow and thrive as community anchors and economic hubs. You are ensuring that more early childhood educators are available throughout our region. And as you work to create more sustainable career paths for those teachers, you're also helping to guarantee that other families have safe and dependable childcare and education, the workforce behind the workforce. You are working to make sure that students of all ages are connected to the hands-on experiences that open a world of opportunity. Whether that's becoming the first in a family to go to college, or graduating with credentials that help guarantee a lifetime of financial security. In all of these ways, and many, many more, you are helping our communities to become interconnected places where everyone can live, learn, earn, and thrive, just like we saw in the Spindale video. And we know that there is much more to do. This time, 3 years ago, Dogwood held our first community meeting, and we are still young in our work, and we're thrilled to be partnering with you in so many ways I've mentioned and more. Looking back, we've accomplished a lot through some really challenging years. A pandemic, a time of racial reckoning, environmental adversity, and economic hardships. These have been rough times, especially for those among us with the least. I know at times we've all felt like things are unraveling. These times require us to really listen and learn from each other so that we can connect and come back stronger. Every day, we see inspired, impassioned, and thoughtful things happening in our region. And that's not surprising when you consider that ours is a region with a long history of demonstrating ingenuity to solve entrenched problems, compassion for neighbors in times of need, and resilience in the face of adversity. We at Dogwood value the time and experiences that we've had to work side by side with so many partners across our region who understand that the main factors that contribute to healthy and fulfilling lives are largely factors that come into play outside of the delivery of medical care. Safe and stable housing, a solid education, employment that supports your family and helps develop wealth, access to healthy spaces where people can move, play, and connect with one another, and services that promote both physical as well as mental and emotional health. All of these social determinants or drivers of health are what people in our region need and deserve to achieve true health. So our goal today is to share where we'll be focusing in 2023 to provide more clarity about partnership opportunities and to hear from you, our partners and community. In 2023, we will continue to refine our approaches to the 4 strategic priority areas that our board approved in 2020: housing, education, economic opportunity, and health and wellness so that Western North Carolinians can live, learn, earn, and thrive, no exceptions. Our partners are addressing these social drivers of health in imaginative ways. In fact, many of our partners, about 200 of you, are here today with us as part of this first ever regional partner convening. And we're hosting this convening so that we all can forge new relationships, share information, and build stronger networks. And we're hoping that we can grow this event and have even more partners in future years. Because of your work and collaboration with each other and with us, so far this year, Dogwood Health Trust has made or committed about $74 million in grants and more than $12 million in impact investments for 2022. As you know, Western North Carolina hasn't always been able to claim our fair share of federal or state dollars to our region. So we've been working with partners and brought an additional $10 million from outside sources. And we have more than $50 million in additional funds pending awards. In 2021, we used what we heard from partners and the community, combined with additional research and look at the data, to create 17 goals and 37 objectives across our strategic priority areas. You can find them on our website at dogwoodhealthtrust.org. Yes, that's a lot to tackle. And as we considered our approach to bold change in our region, we know that we had to figure out, where do we start? So for much of this year, we've been listening, researching, studying to determine where we can make the biggest difference right now. We've also come to recognize just how much the work of these priority areas intertwines. So we've been focusing on where we can begin to weave the threads together to create a stronger and more effective fabric of community engagement and community investment. Where is the fabric already woven in ways that we can add to it? Where are the threads being pulled too thin? What do we need to create together to make weaving that fabric an inclusive and equitable process? And what do we collectively want the new fabric to look and feel like? As we've listened to you and studied our past grants and new data, we've begun to identify those starting places, those anchor threads that will guide the texture and pattern of our work with you. You expressed a desire to infuse communities stiffed by the loss of economic engines with new opportunities. You told us that while you have visions of quality education, more affordable homes, and caring health providers, the lack of qualified workers to fill those jobs has reached a critical state. You've told us that you want to see opportunities for our communities to become more resilient, helping individuals heal from trauma, recover from addiction, and find meaningful and dignified work, and attain an education that supports their dreams. We heard you. And in a few minutes, you'll hear from our team about our focus areas for 2023, those anchor threads that will form stronger connections and a stronger fabric, supporting your work to make our communities more equitable, resilient places. As we refine our strategies toward investing in communities, we are also focusing and clarifying our grant-making process so that these investments can be as strategic as possible and deliver results. We heard you say that you'd like more specific information on how our funding process works. And I'm happy to share that next year we'll move to 2 grant cycles. We anticipate the first cycle opening in January, with payments made by June and July. And we're planning a second cycle to open in May, with payments made by the end of the year. You can find this information on our grant-making page on our website right now. And with the input from this convening, our team will finalize focused funding opportunities with clear guidelines that will be posted before the end of the year. Also, between now and the end of the year, we'll focus on completing our review and processing the current grants applications we have, and we'll consider new applications that we receive for potential funding in 2023, depending on alignment with our focus areas. We are always interested in hearing your ideas, and we invite you to keep those ideas coming. You can share them via the Start a Conversation link on our website, or you can speak directly with any member of our community investment team. As we become more focused, this means that we won't be able to fund a broad field of requests as we've done over the past 3 years. Initially, we cast a wide net to learn from our region and our partners and to respond to the deep needs in our community that were exposed through the pandemic. Now, we believe that the best way to address the region's needs is to go deep, examining the roots of each problem and making changes there. Addressing changes at their roots will allow strong people and communities to grow. As we continue to develop, our team is exploring the many ways that Dogwood Health Trust can support your work. Our weaving includes many types of threads and textures, and we have many forms of philanthropic capital beyond the financial. For example, we actively deploy our connections and networks from across the state and the country, our social capital, to bring more opportunities to nonprofits in our region. Many organizations can benefit from our investments through things like capacity building to strengthen organizational resiliency, or leverage that draws funds from outside sources. We can also use our position as a large funder, our reputational capital, to help introduce and convene not-for-profits and governments across the region, so that we can all forge connections that are mutually rewarding and strengthening. In fact, we're here today doing just that. Our intellectual capital consists of data and research that we can share openly. You may remember the housing study that we released at the end of last year, or the early education landscape study that we shared just a few weeks ago. And we're currently preparing to release more data on the K-12 landscape, a report on access to capital in our region, and a look at Western North Carolina's agricultural community. We will continue to collect and analyze information important to our region going forward, and whatever we learn, we'll share. And finally, we commit to do what's right, to use our moral capital by speaking up for equity and fairness, and supporting advocacy that informs and elevates civic discourse and helps improve policies affecting Western North Carolina. As we've been thinking about how we can invest our capital most strategically and effectively, we've also been considering how we show up with you to do this work, and how we contribute to the regional tapestry with equity, humility, respect, and transparency. I hope you will continue to give us your honest feedback on how we're doing in this regard. The work of change is hard, but it's also exceedingly hopeful. That hope is clear in a message we received from the Davis family, who moved into one of those new homes you saw in the video being constructed in Spindale's neighborhood revitalization. As 9-year-old Melody wrote, We have lived in some homes that were not in good shape. They had bugs and mice, and we don't like those. At our new house, we will be able to walk to the park, the library, and downtown. And her 6-year-old sister, Malia, told us, "I can't wait to be near the parks and trails and to ride my bike into a brand new Spindale." Together, I know our communities across Western North Carolina will be collaborative, compassionate, and courageous. And we will work to create a region where Melody and Malia and everyone can live, learn, earn, and thrive without exception. Over the past several months, our team has been extremely fortunate to be guided in our learning, thought, and planning by David Dotson, the former president of MDC in Durham. David is an expert in philanthropy, having served as the executive director of the Cummins Engine Foundation and on the boards of the Public Welfare Foundation and the Mary Reynolds Babcock Foundation, and on and on and on. Most recently, he served as MDC's past president, where he co-created the Passing Gear Philanthropy Practice, which focuses philanthropic investments on the upstream causes of social disparities. We are so pleased to have David with us here today, and we've asked him to help us dig a little deeper into how we can all work together in service to our region. I'd like to welcome David Dotson to the stage.
Susan, thank you so much. That was wonderful to see and hear all that incredible progress. And though I cannot see you because of these very strong lights, I think we can all feel the excitement that comes from seeing what is unfolding before our eyes with the hands and help of everyone in this room and online. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you today. And to talk about how we can imagine and build a Western North Carolina that works well for everyone. To imagine and build a better future and then come together to build it. That, in a nutshell, is what the shared work of Dogwood and you is all about. To imagine a region where conditions make it possible for all people to thrive. To imagine a region where the basics of life, health, education, housing, and opportunity are abundantly available, and where people work hand in hand with their neighbors to eliminate gaps in health and livability. A place where every generation has an uncompromised opportunity to, as Susan said, live, learn, earn, and thrive, and my favorite two words, without exception. So, how do we get there? What do we, and that's a we, need to do to make that aspiration so beautifully laid out in the slides and words that you've heard, to make that aspiration a living reality? Well, Susan has hinted that the answer could look something like this. There it is. So this is the second time you've seen a weaving loom, everybody. Are you getting a theme here as it begins? But you might want to ask, what does a loom have to do with community, with philanthropy, and with shared well-being? Well, maybe it has more than we think. Over 30 years ago, an English nun named Sister Mary Clare, that's right, an English nun, wrote these profound words: "We must accept the fact that we are in an age in which the cloth is being unwoven. It is therefore no good trying to patch. We must rather set up the loom on which the coming generations may weave new cloth." Just listen to those words. It is no good trying to patch what is coming apart. We must rather set up the loom on which coming generations may weave new cloth. Sister Mary Claire was speaking about spiritual matters, but the image of weaving and the loom applies to our work as well. For many of us in this region, the cloth of community, the vital threads of security and health and well-being have become frayed. And as the cloth comes apart at the seams, people and places are falling through the gaps. The fraying cloth is not strong enough to support future generations to live out their dreams. We are past the point of patching systems and structures that no longer work. It's time to weave new patterns of community, health, and opportunity. And Sister Mary Claire reminds us that there can be no new patterns unless we first build the loom to enable the cloth to be woven. That really is the work that Dogwood and you, as community partners, have taken up. To build the loom that can nurture the imaginative ideas, strengthen the infrastructure, so that people of Western North Carolina can weave the new patterns of health, sustainability, and shared well-being now and into the future. So what's required to build the loom? Susan mentioned in her remarks that Dogwood intends to bring many forms of philanthropic capital to the table in partnership with you, the people and organizations and communities of Western North Carolina. But here's the point, and this is really the point of this talk. Foundations aren't the only ones with philanthropic capital. Every organization, every community in Western North Carolina has philanthropic capital. And the region is going to need all of it, Dogwood's and yours, to build the loom on which the new patterns of well-being can be woven. Now, just to make it a little easier to remember, we have a name for the philanthropic capital we all bring to the work of shaping our shared future. And yes, thank you for laughing. We call this Smurf, not the little point, not that Smurf, but we call this Smurf. Social. Keep laughing. It's supposed to be funny, but you can remember it that way. Social, moral, intellectual, reputational, and financial capital. All of us have Smurf at our disposal. So let's briefly unpack what Smurf means for us ordinary people who live in community. S is for social capital. The healthy, vibrant, equitable communities depend on rich reservoirs of social capital, networks and relationships of trust and respect that need to exist between and among people, organizations, and communities, and the people they serve. Trust and respect. I've heard a number of people mention trust today in sessions. A wise person once told me Divided communities don't develop. Divided communities don't develop. Trusting relationships lubricate successful community, and without them, collaboration and partnership simply aren't possible. So here comes the first of several questions. There will be an exam. Who in this room has social capital? Put your hand up. Ooh, Susan, where'd you find all these smart people? So here's my question for you. You with social capital. How will you use your relationships with people whose lives are falling short of their promise? Where will you help build bridges and connections for isolated, marginalized, and forgotten communities between the powerful and the powerless? Bryan Stevenson, the great champion of liberation for people who have been unjustly incarcerated, talks about the importance of getting proximate or close to people who suffer so we can hear and feel their needs, be energized by their hopes, and respond authentically to their dreams. How will you use your social capital to get proximate to people and places that are on the margins of opportunity? Moral capital. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced." Moral capital is about naming what must be changed to make Western North Carolina a place of health and shared well-being for everyone, without exception. Who in this room has moral capital? Can't see. Who? Let me see. Hands up. Moral capital. Look around, see the moral capital in this room. Here's the question. You know I'm going to ask you a question and then I'm going to ask you another one. How will you use your moral capital to name the undiscussable barriers to healthy community so that we can build the loom and weave the new pattern together? What issues are under the table that need to be on the table? What needs to be faced and changed with courage and civility so we can create an accurate blueprint for the future? Intellectual capital. Susan Beresford, for many years the president of the Ford Foundation, was fond of saying, the currency of foundations is ideas. The currency of foundations is ideas. Not money, ideas. Who here has intellectual capital? Oh, come on. Is every hand up in the room? What ideas will you bring forward to help build the loom and weave the new pattern? How will you call out the creative voices in Western North Carolina, especially those that might be silent and undervalued today? What innovative ideas are you prepared to contribute to help shape the future? Reputational capital. Reputational capital is about courage. It is closely related to moral capital. In fact, moral capital is lifeless unless people and organizations put it into action by displaying courage in the pursuit of fair, sustainable, and healthy communities. Who here has reputational capital? Boy, these hands need to get higher. Don't be shy. I want you to... Where can you be more courageous in pursuit of the vision of a place that works well for everyone without exception? And finally, financial capital. Western North Carolina is deeply fortunate to have the resources of the Dogwood Health Trust, guided by people who know and love this region. Few other communities are as well resourced, but as we have seen, multiple forms of philanthropic capital working together are needed to build the loom on which a new pattern of healthy, vibrant, and equitable Western North Carolina can be woven. So that's the theory. That's the theory. You raised your hand. There's a lot of capital in this room, a lot to work with. But I suspect you might be saying, that is all fine, but how real is this Smurf idea? Terry Sanford, when he was the governor of North Carolina, was out in the field one day and someone was heckling him. They threw all these kinds of questions at him. And finally, he answered them. He returned all the serves. Finally, someone stood up and said, "Mr. Sanford, do you believe in infant baptism?" And he thought for a moment. He's a very smart man, and responded to the heckler, "Heck, I've even seen it done." So I want to give you a powerful, real-life example of philanthropy and community coming together to deploy their Smurf to build the loom. Over 100 years ago, Julius Rosenwald, the president of Sears Roebuck department stores, was moved by the plight of black children in the South who were denied proper schooling because of segregationist laws. He was convinced that if black communities could have their own schools where learning could occur in safe, dignified, modern facilities, the effect could be transformative. He was prepared to use his wealth to make this happen, but he also believed in more than passive charity. His vision, informed by his friendship with Booker T. Washington, the renowned black educator and proponent of self-help, uplift, was powerful and unprecedented. Rosenwald would fund a portion of the construction of new schools if, and only if, cash-poor black communities would raise the remaining cost of building those schools. And then Rosenwald went one step farther. He agreed to fund construction only if the school boards, the local school boards, would fund the maintenance of the new black schools. This was a radical challenge to public officials who, up to now, had refused to use any public funds to support adequate education for black children. Miraculously, Rosenwald's vision struck a chord. Across the South, impoverished black communities of sharecroppers, farmers, day laborers held bake sales and barbecues and pooled their nickels, dimes, and quarters to meet the terms of Rosenwald's challenge. Using designs provided by Sears Roebuck, they used sweat equity to build new schools themselves. Rosenwald schools began to sprout all across the South until by 1930, less than 20 years after he started, the region was dotted with over 5,000 Rosenwald schools, with the largest number of any state being in North Carolina. And these 5,000 schools launched tens, hundreds of thousands of leaders who could go on to serve future generations. Rosenwald had challenged cash-poor communities to discover and deploy their Smurf to build a loom on which a new pattern of opportunity and equity would be woven from generation to generation. What did he do? First of all, he inspired communities to come together and put their social capital to work in the face of scarcity and oppression in order to help people realize what seemed to be impossible dreams. He used his moral and reputational capital to get segregated school districts to go against their own practices and policies to maintain schools that black communities had built for themselves. That was truly revolutionary. And then he used Sears Roebuck's intellectual capital to create dignified, easy-to-build designs for modern school buildings, cutting construction costs and complexity. Finally, Rosenwald used his financial capital as a challenge to help cash-poor communities create new sources of monetary abundance. Think about how many fried chicken dinners and bake sales had to happen in order to build 5,000 schools. Rosenwald's philanthropic capital unleashed the Smurf of thousands of communities, and together they changed the South. Smurf turned scarcity into abundance. In a moment, you will hear from Dogwood's community investment vice presidents how they will be using their Smurf along with your Smurf to help build the loom. As they speak, I invite you to ask yourselves and one another, how can I do my part? How can I use my Smurf to build the loom? What is the new pattern I will help Western North Carolina weave? Are you ready to build the loom? Oh, yeah! Are you ready to do some weaving? Thank you very much.
Age.
These lovely chairs.
Hi.
Greetings, colleagues. All right, here is the moment we all have been waiting for, the great reveal of ideas spoken by the people who are leading them. And it's a real joy to introduce, which will soon happen, the vice presidents for community investment of the Dogwood Health Trust. Susan, would you like to say anything, or should we just jump into...
Well, I'm just inspired by your words and by what we've heard today, and can't wait to share this information so that we can hear from you and, as you said, all work on the loom and the weaving together.
All right. Got some fabulous carpenters and weavers on this panel. And we're going to ask them to introduce themselves, starting with Erica and then moving down the line. Thank you.
Absolutely. My name is Erica Williams. I serve as Vice President for Education here at Dogwood Health Trust. About 3 weeks shy of a year in service here at Dogwood, and I live in South Asheville, Arden, and Buncombe County.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Thompson. I'm the Vice President for Economic Opportunity. I just passed my 1-year mark with the team, and I live out in Sylvan, North Carolina, in Jackson County.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Alex Howard. I joined the organization in April of this year. I serve as Vice President of Health and Wellness, and I live in Boone, up in Watauga County.
My name is Sarah Grimes. I am the VP of Housing for the Trust. I've been with Dogwood, a little over 1.5 years now, and I live in Columbus, North Carolina, in Polk County.
I'm Bill Keinert. I am the Vice President for Resourcing Impact for Dogwood Health Trust. I've been here since day one, which is a long time. You'll see I have to have notes, right? I'm the old guy on the couch. And I am from Mills River in Henderson County.
Great. Thank you. So that's our lineup. And what we are going... Yes! I love that. Yay! What each of our colleagues will now do is to give a brief introduction into priorities for the coming year, and also help us understand how you arrived at those priorities. And then we will open this up for a chance for you to ask your questions about anything you have heard. Erica?
Yeah, absolutely. We are very excited on the education team as we head into 2023. A few weeks ago, we did a request for proposals to address the early child care and education workforce issues in our region. And so we're still working on those final numbers, but we know that it will be somewhere over the $5 million mark of an investment in the early child care. Yeah, you can whistle at that. It's okay. You know, and it really is about contributing to our statewide and our national narrative on sound, better, and best practices for fueling what Susan termed earlier the workforce behind the workforce. We heard lots of emphases on the work that these primarily women and men do in this profession every day at the height of the pandemic, and we know that, as we heard earlier today, we're talking about a state of crises for that profession. And so how can Dogwood contribute in all those forms of capital to this state and national narrative around what is it that can be done to innovate, to recruit, retain, and attract people to the early care and education workforce. So we'll be launching with those finalists in the early part of 2023. They will be joining with the Frank Porter Graham Start with Equity Academy. It will be an incredible year ahead. We're going to go deep there with early childhood. We're also excited about joining into a deeper dive with what we're calling Western North Carolina After 3, WNC After 3 p.m. Our team did a deep review and analysis of how you, the community, have shown up to us with requests over the last couple of years. Lots of our partners across the East, the West, and the Central regions have come to us for support with efforts to support our students in the K through 12 space. What happens after that last bell of the school day is so critical for what goes on before the end of the school day. And so we'll be going deeper there in that space in 2023, and we look forward to inviting the community to come with us on that. And then the other piece I guess I'll emphasize, and there'll be others, but primarily today, is our collaboration with economic opportunity and the other areas around our career and technical education piece as we look at retention and graduation rates for our students in K-12 and making sure that we're preparing for those career and college-ready skills that are so critical. And so economic opportunity and education will be meeting with CTE directors, career technical ed directors, in about 3 weeks with a conversation around what is it and how is it that we can show up to support them to move more of our students into those pipelines that really cut across all 4 of our areas: housing with construction, HVAC, electrical, healthcare professions, entrepreneurial courses, early child care ed credentials. How can we show up with our partners in that K-12 space to close those spaces where we can have much more opportunity for our learners and hold on to them in that space? So we're looking forward to 2023.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah. Sarah.
Yes, so, excuse me, I want to use my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. Economic Opportunity Team is considering 2023 the year of workforce. It will come as no surprise to any of you that this is necessary to focus on this at this time. It's a very unusual time for our economy, and a very tight labor market is one significant factor of that. There are more people, there are more jobs available than there are people looking for jobs. So we will focus on strategies both in long-term career development, starting with young students in the K through 12 school system, while also addressing and looking for solutions to the immediate needs of the workforce shortages. There are many populations of individuals who are very close to being ready for employment, but have barriers and extra needs in order to reach that gainful employment. These may be justice-involved individuals or those in recovery from substance use disorder, and they may also be adults looking to gain new skills that will allow them to earn family-sustaining income. So we will work to grow and strengthen those support systems and organizations that work with those individuals with barriers to employment to help increase the quality and quantity of the region's workforce. There are a lot of organizations in our region that touch this area all along the spectrum, and we're looking forward to partnering in creative and innovative and new initiatives that address the needs both of the businesses who need the employees and the individuals striving for more fulfilling employment that will allow them to live a healthy life and support their family. We will also continue to focus on the entrepreneurial networks that we worked a lot on this year. We recently completed a study entitled the WNC Capital Landscape Assessment, which identifies all of the various organizations in the region that provide capital and also support services to small business and entrepreneurs. We'll be hosting a webinar in November to release those findings, so keep an eye out for that on our various media releases. But what's notable is that we have a very robust ecosystem network of organizations that provide this capital and support. But there's a lot of room to strengthen the connectivity of that network and to strengthen those organizations themselves so that they can serve more people. This is a region primarily of small businesses. Those are who create our jobs and the livelihoods for our citizens. So our work in 2023 will continue to focus on that network, as well as the sector development initiatives that give this region the good reputation that it has as a place to start a business. We're always on the lookout for opportunities to invest in the general economic ecosystem of the region, as quality jobs and retention are essential to growing and improving the economy. And finally, access to quality broadband is an issue that is woven throughout all of Dogwood's priority areas. You cannot talk about any of what we do without recognizing that the lack of quality broadband has a severely, oftentimes negative impact on the ability to thrive. So we're looking at various ways that we can leverage our funds to bring in the abundance of federal funds that are coming available, but we're also very focused on the digital equity and inclusion initiatives. One example being the Affordable Connectivity Program that exists through the federal government funding, but is very undersubscribed to in the region. So looking for ways to use the programs that exist and get them to more of our people.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Wonderful. Alex, health and wellness.
Health and wellness, a team that consists of Rebecca Telberg, April Bragg, Michael Passant, Hannah Van Riggenmorter, and Margarita Gonzalez, our newest member. We're very excited about 2023 because it represents a time in which we will fine-tune our efforts to support community health improvement strategies. I need to emphasize the next sentence. While we will continue to respond to emerging challenges and opportunities, we intend to exert the bulk of our efforts in 4 primary areas. The first of which is the prevention of adverse childhood experiences and children associated or connected to the child welfare system. We wish to aid efforts that facilitate the development of resilient family ecosystems that are nurturing and promote the holistic well-being of children and youth throughout the region. The second area of interest for us involves maternal-child health outcomes. We specifically want to support efforts that seek to reduce disparities that are associated with race and ethnicity, as well as lower socioeconomic status. The third strategic focal area for us involves the complex challenges of substance use disorder. SUD continues to rise to the top when we talk about risk factors that are embedded or influence everything else we do. For that reason, we intend to continue to collaborate across the region to enhance recovery support services, as well as increase clinical access to treatment services for SUD. We are also committed to work across disciplines such as education and public health to identify promising prevention strategies that target children and youth. The last area, which I'm extremely excited about, that we're working on, involves every strategic priority area within Dogwood, supporting efforts that enhance the health-related workforce within the region. We consistently hear from you all. We have great ideas, we have work, we have needs, but we don't have the people. We intend to invest in the coming year in assessing what are those needs and then identifying strategies to actually take action and do something about it that is sustainable. So stay tuned. Super excited about the workforce needs and the work we will be doing across strategic areas. In addition to these efforts, 2023 also represents a time in which we will engage deeply with community through convenings and listening sessions. Our hope is to learn from the people we serve, and through greater understanding of our regional needs, we will develop more strategic and timely investment plans that are driven by your voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you, David. In 2021 and 2022, we learned that leverage and partnership could accomplish so much with all of you. In 2023, we want to continue that great work with our partners, but to get even more strategic in our 5 focus areas that were identified and solidified by our board last year. So we can navigate past this post-COVID environment where we have a lack of construction workforce, rising interest rates, and still continuing high interest or high construction costs. Our first goal, healthy and safe neighborhood revitalizations, where we are not displacing families and not purposefully causing gentrification. We will work closely with our internal partners in education, health and wellness, economic opportunity, and not just think about the housing unit, but we want to think about the family and the needs of the family living in that unit. We will be looking for opportunities to fund revitalizations where partners are coming together to do true community-led work and are leveraging federal, state dollars, particularly community development block grants. And as you saw in the video about Spindale, we would love to see more of those neighborhood revitalizations across our footprint. We appreciated so much in 2021 and 2022 the partnership with our legacy foundations to get dollars for home repair and housing rehabilitation deep into communities across our region. And we would like to continue this partnership. We would also like to continue to support our home repair and housing rehabilitations partners across the region who are managing the very difficult urgent repair programs, essential single-family rehab programs, and the USDA housing preservation grants. As homeownership is the gateway to generational wealth, we want to explore opportunities and innovative strategies to close the gaps that so often affect our underserved communities and our communities of color. Our second goal, supportive housing. We will research best practices for each type of supportive housing and learn from our partners in our footprint, as well as across the state and country with successful housing developments. We have a dedicated staff person and intern already working on this work, and we'll be working with so many of you in 2023. Internally, as this is a priority for our health and wellness team, and we'll be using our resourcing impact team to collaborate closely to make the biggest impact for supportive housing. But we don't want to stop the work that's already being done in supportive housing. We know we have a lot to learn, but that does not mean that we want to stop any progress for housing for persons with mental, physical, and developmental disabilities, persons exiting incarceration, persons escaping domestic violence, persons experiencing homelessness, persons struggling with substance use disorder, and children in and aging out of foster care. We will be looking for opportunities to fund supportive housing initiatives where partners are coming together and are leveraging opioid settlement dollars as well as North Carolina Housing Finance Agency loans. Our third goal, senior housing, we made great strides in 2021 and 22 with our aligned partners. In 2023, we would like to also provide capacity building in partnership with our resourcing impact team to partners wanting to develop more senior housing. In 2023, we also want to learn more about the housing challenges our seniors face across Western North Carolina. We want to learn more from our Council on Aging partners. We want to learn how best to help seniors age in place, especially thinking of that in our initiatives we are funding in our neighborhood revitalization work. We want to do research in concepts like universal design to see how that can create more inclusive communities. Goal 4, creation and preservation of affordable housing. We want to provide pre-development grants to nonprofit developers continuing to pursue the competitive 9% tax credits. We want to invest funds to help leverage the home investment partnership programs through consortiums across our footprint to really leverage those annual affordable housing dollars that are so important to our low-income households. We want to make impact investments for land acquisition and gap funding for affordable housing, and we want to make impact investments for preservation of affordable housing. Also, in partnership with our economic opportunity team, we plan to grant to groups who are developing the construction workforce, but also creating, through sweat equity, affordable housing. Our fifth goal, workforce housing, will be working through our impact investment tool. We want to partner with nonprofit developers as well as counties and municipalities to create new workforce opportunities. We will be focusing all across our region in 2023, and in an effort to preserve the Western North Carolina beauty and the landscape we all hold so dear, we would love to see requests where existing structures are being repurposed. In all requests, we will love to see lots of leveraging and partnership that got us so far in 2021 and 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just, a little editorial. It's interesting to have a foundation person say, we would love to see. I just wanted to say that. doesn't happen a lot. Very invitational approach from all of you. Thank you. Bill.
You've heard from each of my colleagues about the priorities developed with Western North Carolina Voices. To achieve these priorities, Dogwood must rely on its partners, like you, who are aligned closely with the vision that we all share, based on the needs that are so keenly expressed across Western North Carolina. As we think about this exciting body of work, another reality resonates, and that is that Dogwood has no hands but yours. No hands to invest in, to partner with, and to trust in but yours. Together, Dogwood with its aligned partners can truly make a difference. This is why our board has made a meaningful commitment to bolster the strength, resiliency, and sustainability of each of our aligned partners, as well as to strengthen Western North Carolina's broader nonprofit ecosystem. This collective strengthening of partners is a shared journey, co-defined and closely supported. We are creating a leverage council, which is a team of professionals who can provide each aligned partner with custom-tailored support to help them become most effective in their service and most attractive to a broad range of local, state, and national funders, as well as other private philanthropists. This ever-evolving strength among our aligned partners leads to greater opportunities to leverage funding from outside the region. To date in 2022, Susan mentioned that we have helped bring in $10.1 million already from outside this region for our aligned partners. What's really neat about that is there's a $51.7 million pipeline still waiting for decisions, hopefully before the end of the year. So our goal in that regard is to work with each one of you to leverage the capacity that you have, the capacity that you want to build, to increase that pipeline each year to about the size of what Dogwood's overall granting budget is. So at any one given time, could we have $76 million in requests from outside of our region in addition to what Dogwood is doing inside our region? Dogwood is committed to ensuring that these investments in our partners go beyond the status quo and reach partners who have been denied access to capital and tools to better serve their respective communities. Dogwood recently launched an equity-focused capacity pilot that includes a partner from each one of our 3 major regions, East, Central, and West. These partners have the benefit of a firm dedicated to their aspirations for effectiveness and service. One of these pilot participants has already landed a competitive Department of Education award for $308,000, an award that they very likely would not have been in the running for before. Our learnings from this pilot will help Dogwood develop its ever-deepening commitment to historically under-resourced partners, so critical to the success and vision for Western North Carolina. And finally, in closing, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues in Resourcing Impact, Angela Anderson, Jessica Bond, Stephen Blunt. We are ready to help your organization be all that your aspirations contain as our vital and aligned partners.
Thank you so much. Those were great. A couple of questions as you get ready to ask your questions of this remarkable group. Each of you has talked about going deep in your subject matter area, but you've also spoken about ways in which your areas intersect and will draw on and build on one another. Can you talk about why crossing boundaries, why intersections among education and economic development, or economic opportunity and health, or housing and education, or capacity building are so essential to building that loom and weaving that fabric? Why is it important to work in an interdisciplinary way and to invite that from our communities?
Sure, I'll start with that. I think the biggest, first, it's so exciting to have an organization in the region that is focused on all of these various issues that are so inherently intertwined with one another. And I think the workforce example is really a good one to use as an example because, you know, the workforce goal falls within economic opportunity, but I think you heard all of my colleagues mention workforce as a major issue in their area. With housing, we have, you know, since the 2008 recession, just a major drop-off in the skilled trades, and we need to rebuild that pipeline of workers. Sarah mentioned we've worked with a couple communities on building up the construction trades programs in the CTE programs of a high school, and the students learning the trades are actually building a house that will go into the affordable housing system network of that community. So it's just a wonderful combination of training and providing a needed piece of infrastructure. In education, you know, Erica's been very focused on the early childhood education workforce, but we're also talking about career development can start with very young children. So her specialty is the K through 12 system. My focus is on career development. We can work together to do long-range career development programs to build the next generation of workers. Health and wellness, before the pandemic, we were facing major shortages in the healthcare industry, and the pandemic kind of pushed us into crisis mode. And so we really need to rebuild that workforce so we can combine our relationships with the workforce development institutions in the region and our colleagues' experience in the healthcare system to really work together to rebuild that workforce. In addition to the SUD work, where we all, I think, know that an important component of someone in recovery is to get gainful employment and to have a reason and an income and some agency over their life. So that's just one way that I think all of our work intertwines, and we're going to really just take it and run with it next year.
Would anyone else like to respond to that weaving? You're all doing it, and that was a great response. So I'm going to go to the next one. Each of you has, without necessarily using the word, illuminated the principle of equity, or essentially saying there are barriers and burdens to full participation that have to be addressed if we're going to live into our vision. Would you like us to talk about why equity matters in your area and what you hope equity can look like as your work unfolds and succeeds?
I'll jump in there, David. Later today, but on October 26th, the Ed Policy Institute of North Carolina, UNC, will be sharing the landscape study that Susan referenced earlier on our snapshot for Western North Carolina of how our students are performing K-12. That report is disaggregated across all sorts of groups: English language learners, students with disabilities, students of color, students in the highest quartile for poverty, lowest quartile. In our attempt to unpack where we are and establish our baselines, we must begin with the prism of equity. How do we address the deepest needs across the East, the West, and the Central regions of the Dogwood footprint? We cannot approach this in a one-size-fits-all way. Our partners have shown us that. The data are showing us that. And as we head into 2023, the education team is excited to come back and bring this full circle. This work started before I came 40-some weeks ago. And they listened. They listened to you. They were in your communities. You came to our Zooms. You talked to us candidly and transparently about what the issues were. Now we've got some baseline data that show where we were a few years before the pandemic, a year or so before the pandemic, and now in this endemic state. And those scholars are going to unpack that for us. That report, the registration for that webinar will go live in the days ahead. We invite you back because that's where this closing of the loop with the conversation around how do we approach what our families and children need in that K-12 space before 3 p.m. How are we going to do that together, hand in hand? The Dogwood team here will be working in those first couple of months of 2023 with that prism of equity for that population. And on the other side, David, with our early childhood education workforce launch, everything about that process, from the application, from the report, Start with Equity report, the 14 recommendations for federal, state policy, and local tribes and groups to get involved and engaged in changing the narrative for our youngest residents in our region. The lead scholar for that was with us earlier today, and we'll be working with our partners who will be in that cohort next year, unpacking what they identified, what those partners in the East, the West, and the Central regions identified as their primary equity goal they want to work on with their staff and with their community, either through their curriculum, their approaches with recruitment, et cetera. And in the RFP, we prioritize first-generation people who had not had an opportunity for post-secondary education, centers and places that were led by BIPOC leaders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because we must start at the beginning if we're going to talk about generational change for the citizens of Western North Carolina.
Thank you. That's going to be the last word now, but not the last word about equity. And thank you for making it so eloquent, because we want to hear questions from our assembled audience. And I think we also have provision to hear from folks who might have written it on the chat. And please raise your hand or stand, and the microphone will come to you if you would like to ask a brief and profound question.
Hi, I'm Howard Walkowicz. Within your 5 initiatives, where does financial wellness fit in?
Thank you.
I'll take that, although I would argue it could fit into many of our areas. But the economic opportunity goals and philosophy of our team are around financial literacy programs, financial wellness of the family. I sometimes joke that my job at Dogwood is to raise the median household income of the whole region. You know, we want to create wealth building opportunities, whether it be through homeownership or through higher education credentials that will lead to better paying jobs.
I would just briefly add, we actually have a number of partners with us today that are engaged in this space already, and it's core to the work we do. Again, when we talk about serving the basics, getting back to the basics, you have to start with, can I pay my bills? Is that even an option for me? And what does that mean in terms of literacy? So again, I'm looking at some of the partners we're engaged with that are here with us today. So it's definitely interwoven in the work we're doing and will continue to do.
Thank you.
Hello, this is Sue Lynn Ledford. I'm from as far west as you can go without falling into Tennessee or Georgia in Cherokee County. And I'm the executive director for Foursquare in that area. So I don't know if we have other extreme far western groups here, but I would kind of direct this to you, Alex. When I'm looking at the fact that maternal and child health issues are major issues in most of our rural counties in western North Carolina, I cannot help but wonder what the strategies might be as it relates, because every single one of the people on this stage have some component of that. The education, the economic well-being, the housing, everything is all intertwined with that well-being. But the women in our 4 counties that I represent, there's not a hospital that delivers babies. And we do not have obstetric care. And so they're having to travel out of state or into, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours for many of them to receive, obstetric care. And I'm a nurse. I'm overseeing all these social determinants now, because you talk about going upstream and to the root of the problem. If we start out poorly, you can expect the trajectory to go poorly. So I am very curious what the actions are to address that very looming need that we have.
Yeah, I appreciate you raising that, and I promise my response is not me ducking. I got a pretty thick chin and will take a punch any day of the week. But I want you to hear me when I say, while Alex Howard has a lot of strategies that I believe might work, what's important is what you and your community is saying works within your community. So what my team is committed to is going into your area and listening to you and saying, what do you believe might work because of existing data or evidence that's been tried elsewhere? How do we tailor that to your community? And how do we ensure you have the capacity to do it in a sustainable way?
So hi, I'm Betsy Russell. I'm actually with Dogwood Health Trust, and I'm reading questions in from online. This is a question that says, I'm the mother of a disabled Black child. Our family's experience is that Asheville is a friendly community, but has a long way to go to be inclusive and accessible for people with disabilities. We have another question about intellectual disabilities specifically, so I'm putting those together. How is Dogwood Health Trust helping to address the inequities that disabled people, particularly those who are also BIPOC, face specifically in the areas of housing, education, health, and economic opportunity? How is Dogwood Health Trust centering the voices and experiences of disabled BIPOC people in its work?
I'll jump in there first. So a couple of different ways in education. I would kind of return back to, and thank you for that question. Thank you for that question, whomever lifted that up. with the early care and education workforce work that we've initiated, the focus is absolutely on making sure that those communities, those families, those voices like that mom there are captured and highlighted, that those infants, toddlers, young children with disabilities are prioritized in the efforts that are supported, and that people of color who are leading in those spaces are emphasized as well. In the K-12 space, again, I'll just go back to the report and the data that we'll be sharing and the conversation that we'll be coming back to have with the community as we curate a fine-tuned, regionally aligned approach for the regions that we serve. We disaggregate data by those very groups so that we can call out what it is that we need to face. I think David talked about that earlier, that we have to name it, identify it, and then we can face it. So we are lifting those very populations up first and foremost. And I think those sessions, I think the work that we're doing on the ECE side with education will go right at the heart of some of those concerns for that mom and moms like her.
Hi. First of all, thank you for being here and stressing education. I'm from Transylvania County, and I've talked to people from college all the way to K level, and the general consensus is, due to COVID, we've lost 2 years of progression. So how do we graduate people that aren't ready to go to the next level? And how do we address the 2-year missing block of education? I mean, we may not have the answer today, but it's certainly important.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, that gets to you. I don't know how much time we have. A couple of things to your point. I was with the superintendents, and Jan was here earlier today, Jan of RISA, who represents our K-12 system across Western North Carolina. I was with the superintendents of our entire region a couple of Fridays ago, and that issue was the issue that came up because those COVID relief monies run out in 2024. Now, your leaders in K-12 across the area took those monies and they dug in those spaces, high dosage tutoring, summer learning, credit recovery, and the overwhelming response we've gotten so far, thanks to our colleagues, Julie Trenner and her team there at EPIC, who are capturing these data for the State Department of Public Instruction, it was a success. And the superintendent's questions were, how do we keep this going? We can't let this end in 2024. We're simply trying to dig out, but we've got to do more than dig out. Equal and equity are not the same, right? And so we've got to try to make sure that we're putting pieces in place to intercept what happened in that space. We had disparities and challenges before, and that's what our report will show. Join us on October 26th. COVID laid bare the same thing it did in healthcare and other places. I'm also hopeful that with our WNC After 3 push, when we finish that inventory and really get a sense of how we're showing up already in that space across the community, look at where our gaps are, do we have enough credit recovery going on, opportunities going on in your community, how can we partner? I'm very hopeful that as we open that opportunity up next year, that we're going to show up in those places, because as I said earlier, a lot of what has to happen can't all happen between 8 a.m. and 3 p.m., right? We know this. So we have to go deep there and invest wisely. Thank you for that question.
Hi, my name is Karen Murray, and I'm also from Cherokee County. Sue Lynn Ledford and I go a long way back. Anyway, my heart is with the severely and profoundly disabled in Cherokee County, Graham County, Swain, Clay, and throughout the state of North Carolina. I have a nonprofit that I've started, but I'm the only person who can try to crank it up, and so I'm going to ask for advice as to how to approach you all for services. How the individuals with the most severe and profound disabilities can't even do credit recovery. We're talking, we need transition plans from K-12 and the additional 2 years that an individual can stay in the high school, transition plans that will lead them into the workforce so that they can have a meaningful life. We also, in the health and wellness section, need our hospitals to actually be capable of caring for those with the most severe and profound disabilities. Recently, one of the individuals that I work with, because I work for a service provider here in North Carolina, sat in the emergency room in his wheelchair for over 7 hours trying to get catheterized, and they have no Hoyer lift to get him out of his wheelchair and into his bed. Unacceptable. Just unacceptable. And so what we're dealing with is from the early 3 years old to 12K, we need the severe and profoundly disabled to be identified. They need to be supported, and their families need support. A lot of parents can't have a two-income lifestyle because one parent has to stay home with that child that's so severely disabled.
So
So we need help in Cherokee County. Just as Sue Lynn said, it feels like because we are on the far west side of everything, that these individuals especially are the ones that are cast aside, overlooked, and nobody wants to discuss.
So let these folks respond because we're almost out of time, and I think everybody perhaps can speak to this question.
I think the best way for us to talk about supporting your organization is this. As your work is aligned with Dogwood, and you have a relationship with the program officers and you're co-designing programming work that you want to do. In the first 2 sessions that I did today and with my colleague Greg, there are issues about how much Dogwood can fund you, especially as a nascent organization. So our team is specifically interested in you because you're an aligned partner to help you access those leverage opportunities, those capacity opportunities that position you for leverage that will help diversify your income. And that is not necessarily, as we've seen with the equity pilot, as I mentioned to you earlier, that's not necessarily a long-term haul. That oftentimes has results in a pretty short amount of time, as I mentioned in the Department of Education grant. So I think what I would ask you to do is, first of all, know that we acknowledge the challenges that you're talking about. We hear them on a regular basis, but to be encouraged by the fact that you have an internal commitment to serve, and we want to be there with you to do that. And so Angela in the back, Stephen, Jessica, myself, you can reach out to either one of us, and we'll be glad to talk to you about sort of a pathway to get you to sustainability and to the highest level of service that you'd like to get to.
I think we might have time for one short, brief question.
But Susan, just one, I wanted to ask, because I know there's been some discussion that in some cases advocacy or using the voice of Dogwood can be useful to break through challenging systems blockages like this, where the systems simply aren't responsive to people with severe conditions and needs. Would you like to say anything about your thinking?
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that gets to the rest of your question, which I think there were like 5 or 6 questions in there because there's so much. And but it comes back to what I said of using all of our SMRF. And as an organization, we are really exploring and learning all of the tools that we have beyond the financial. And thinking about when we're in conversations with you, we can identify things and go, wow, we can't grant our way out of that. There's not enough money even in Dogwood to solve that. We need to have that on an advocacy agenda. We need to work with you to say, how do we help everyone in Western North Carolina put our voices together to say, what can we do collectively to make sure that we've got the right support, we've got the voice in Raleigh, we've got access to resources at the federal level so that we collectively can actually work on changing the systems so that everyone has access to what they need. One more question. You've got the microphone,
Hello.
and you're going to be our last one.
Thank you. I get to be the last one. I'm Maui Vang. I'm here representing Hatch Innovation Hub. I'm also the chair of the Mountain Community Capital Fund. And so my question is about entrepreneurship. I think someone mentioned that home ownership is the gateway to building generational wealth, and I agree with that. I also personally experienced and strongly believe that entrepreneurship is also a very powerful gateway, possibly even more so than home ownership, to building that generational wealth. And so my question is, what are some initiatives that you are taking or see that are needed in our region to promote equity and inclusion among entrepreneurship, especially among underrepresented, under-resourced founders?
Yes, thank you for that question. We had a session earlier today that was largely a conversation around the network of capital providers, but also support providers such as Hatch. And Dogwood's focus isn't really on the high growth sector in Asheville, right? Like we recognize it as being a strong component of Western North Carolina's economy, but where is our funds appropriately focused? And it is on BIPOC entrepreneurs, in also rural entrepreneurs, anyone that has faced those barriers to accessing the capital and the support systems that exist robustly throughout the region, but maybe haven't had the invitation to be a part of that or felt the agency to be a part of that. We want to strengthen that network that provides the opportunities to those who have often been left out of that equation. That's the short answer. I'd be happy to talk with you more about specific programs that we've already supported and strategies that we're going to be working on moving forward. Thank you for that question.
Well, I want to say this has been a wonderful, wonderful dialogue. The whole day is wonderful. This time with you is wonderful, hearing from you. And we want to continue the conversation. We want to continue to be in dialogue and hear from you so that as we continue to grow up as a foundation, we collectively can really work on creating that fabric, weaving that fabric of who we are in Western North Carolina. I also want to thank all of our panelists and David so much for their discussion. And I'd like to introduce our board chair, Janice Brummett, who is going to give us a few closing remarks.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm wrapping us up, as they say. I'm the thank you lady. I want to give some thank yous to some folks. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Laura Leatherwood and her wonderful staff for letting us hosting us today at this wonderful facility and this beautiful campus. So I want to thank Laura and her team. That's number one. Number two, I want to tell you that there are some of our board members here today, and I want to tell you how invested they are in Western North Carolina. So if you see them, say hello to them. There's several of them here. There's probably 2/3 of our board here. They've spent the whole day with us, listening and learning about you and your partnership with us. So we want to thank them as well. This is a wonderful panel. You can see our staff is so smart and so creative and so thoughtful. So kudos to them as well. David Dodson, what a find. We are so delighted to have him leading us in some exercises to learn more about passing year philanthropy and also just the wonderful work he's done throughout the South and throughout his career. So thank you, David. Finally, and most importantly, thank you. Thank the people online for joining us. Thank you for being here in person. We can't do this without our partners. We want to hear your voice. Continue to talk to us. Give us ideas. Tell us about your communities. We are in partnership with you. We cannot do this without you. You are, like Bill says, you are our hands out there working in your communities. But we want to tailor programs to your communities. One size does not fit all. Finally, you have heard this time and time again, but to end our day today, I want to continue to tell you, Dogwood's community strategy reflects the spirit of shared vision and collaboration. We are inspired and honored to work with all our partners to truly transform our region. Together, we will create a Western North Carolina where every generation can live, learn, earn, and thrive, no exceptions. Again, thank you for joining us.
No exceptions.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Not a single exception.